All right, we're here to go ahead and knock out 7.2. We finally get into our survey of marine species here, and today we're going to be looking at marine invertebrates. Remember to be following along with your study guide, taking notes, and that you are allowed to use those notes on your test. So make sure that you get everything that is in bold as it comes up on the screen. So invertebrates, you don't have to write this part down. We're going to focus on species themselves in broad terms. But just be aware, if you're not already, that invertebrates are animals that don't have a backbone or bony skeleton. I did it again. Leave this thing hanging around my neck. Get rid of that. All right. So they range in size, a huge range of size, from little tiny microscopic mites that are essentially invisible, all the way up to giant squid who have eyes the size of a soccer ball. So just a huge range of the size that invertebrates can be. And there are lots and lots of invertebrates. So we're talking about 97% of all animals throughout the animal kingdom. All right, sponges. Now we get to our first box here. Notice that we've got 5 different categories of marine invertebrates that we're going to be looking at. Just know these can be broken up in a lot of different ways. We're kind of following along the way that our textbook does it, but if you look at other sources, they may break some of these up into different categories. Marine worms, for example, we have it as one broad category. A lot of textbooks or other sources will break it down into several different categories of marine worms. But anyhow, so sponges. They are a collection of specialized cells. They have no organs. No organs. SpongeBob has no brain, or no heart, or no lungs. Almost all sponges are marine, and they are sessile, meaning that they attach to a substrate. They attach to a rock or to some other surface and just stay there. They are filter feeders, meaning they collect food from the water that they filter through small canals in their body. You can see the canals here. They filter it through. The food comes in as they suck water in, and they get rid of what they don't want. For sponge reproduction, the egg is fertilized inside the sponge. They are planktonic, plankton meaning they are drifters, the larvae are, when they are released into the water. So they are at the mercy of the currents. The larvae cannot swim. They drift in that current until settling in somewhere. And like many invertebrates, the larvae go through a metamorphosis that will then take them into out of its juvenile stage into adulthood. Let's catch this definition of metamorphosis. Go ahead and put that in your sponges category. There is a question on the test related to it. So the process of transformation from an immature form into an adult form. It needs to be at least 2 distinct phases. Sometimes there are more than 2. Think along the lines of butterflies and tadpole into a frog. Those are all metamorphoses. If you want to take a closer look there at the sponge reproduction, you can. I'm going to keep on moving. Then we come to our next category, our cnidarians. This is the next level of complexity. The sponges are as simple as a living organism can possibly be. When we get to our cnidarians, or sponges as simple as an animal can be, I guess we'll go with that. So these have tissues. These tissues perform specific functions. In broad terms, some of our categories of cnidarians include coral, jellies, anemones. And they do have some other relatives as well. A polyp is an example of a cnidarian that has a kind of a sac of a body with tentacles that are facing upward. Some of these polyp are responsible for our coral. That's something that we'll talk about later in our next unit. But coral are made up of lots and lots of these little tiny polyps that then build a kind of a hard shell around them. So even though coral does not seem like it's living, it's actually lots and lots of little living things. Then we have our medusa, which you're probably more familiar with. This is the reverse of the polyp that has its tentacles upward. The medusa has its tentacles facing downward when we think of our typical jellyfish. Also, no, I don't think that's bold. You don't have to write this down. Typically, a cnidarian is going to have nematocysts, which are stinging cells or tentacles of some sort that are used for protection and also used for feeding, used to be able to catch its prey. We do want you to write this part down. We've got about 10,000 species of cnidarians, and they are almost always going to have what's called radial symmetry. Symmetry meaning is its shape symmetric in any way. So there's no symmetry here for our coral, even though it is made of polyps. No symmetry there. When we come to our jellyfish here, radial symmetry. And then here we have what's called bilateral symmetry, which we'll talk about more with some of our other species. Our cnidarians here are radial. There's for radial symmetry, there's a central axis, and from there it can be broken up into equal, identical parts from that central axis. Again, if you want to see more about their reproduction, you can take a moment and do it. Now we move on to marine worms. This is the next level of complexity now beyond cnidarians. We're kind of working in order of complexity from simple to more complex here. So worms have bilateral symmetry, which means that they are the same on both sides, meaning split down the middle long ways, similar to humans, roughly the same on both sides. I mean, maybe very, very minor differences, but I have bilateral symmetry, as do you. This allows marine worms to be a little more active in the hunt for food. They do sort of have brains. They have a back and belly that are different as well. So even though you split them down the middle, they're the same on either side, back and belly are going to be different, similar to us. A couple of examples of marine worms. We've got the flatworm, which has a flat back and belly, over 30,000 varieties. It's the simplest animal that has real organs. For these examples, I do want you to write the name of the examples. You don't have to know anything about them, but you do need to know that flatworm and ribbon worm are examples of marine worms. For our ribbon worms, very, very long. You see how they get their name here, long and tangled. They entangle their prey, and it does have a complete digestive tract. We've got arrowworms and segmented worms as well. Segmented worms, you can see how they get their name. They are in little segments all the way through. All right, moving on to our next category, mollusks. Mollusks include clams, snails, octopus, a number of other things that fall into that category as well. Nearly 100,000 known species. There's lots and lots of different varieties here of mollusks. They typically have a soft body that is enclosed in a calcium-based shell. We say typically. You can probably see on that list one of our more popular marine animals is a mollusk, but does not have that shell. Talking about the octopus. There just lots and lots of variety in what they eat, how they move. This is a very, very broad category with lots of different species that are included in it. So there's not a whole lot of defining details that would apply to all mollusks. It's because they're very, very different from each other. A couple of examples can be broken down into gastropods, which commonly include snails, limpets, nudibranchs. Got an example of one of those here. You got a snail up there. Typically have a coiled mass of vital organs that are within their enclosed shell. Most of these are eating algae for our gastropods. And then we have our bivalves, which have a compressed body that's enclosed within a hinged shell. So this is going to be our oysters, clams, mussels, scallops. Most of these are burrowers. They do not have a head. Kind of interesting to think about, an animal with no head. And we have our cephalopods. These are the most intelligent and most mobile of all of our mollusks. This is where we get our octopus, squid, cuttlefish. Notice that even though we're in the category of mollusks here, that a lot, if not all of these are invertebrates. So our entire lesson today is all invertebrates. These are going to be our most agile swimmers and hunters. Interesting, if you want to take a moment and study this a little bit, really fascinating, this anatomy of an octopus here. You got everything you think of, like, here's his head. There must be a big giant brain in that head of his. Well, it's not just his brain in there. In fact, his brain is fairly small, even though it's very intelligent. Everything is in there, right? We see his brain, but then we've got gonads, intestines, stomach, all of his digestive stuff, esophagus, mouth, ink sac. I mean, everything is all inside there, all packed into what appears to be his head. His stomach is in his head. Pretty crazy. Similar here for a squid. You've got we tend to think of like head here, and then, you know, working your way down to the bottom to the legs. Really, it's pretty much the opposite of that. You got your mouth here for a squid, and then you're working your way this way down to its digestive system. You got your intestines and stomach here. So really, this is more, even though it may be swimming in this direction, and this may look like these are legs, and so that would mean this is the head. That's not how it works for all marine animals. So this guy's kind of more the opposite of what we think when we look at him. And then lastly, we've got our arthropods. This is the largest phylum, over 1 million known species that fall in this category of arthropods. On land, this includes insects. It also has crustaceans in it as well when we get into the ocean. As they grow, they form new shells under their old one, and then they molt the exoskeleton. These are mostly small, but there are a few large examples. We go to prehistoric times, we have some very, very large examples of these, but in modern times, most of them are pretty small. Barnacles are a good example of this. They're filter feeders that attach to a surface, like a whale or a boat. Isopods, they have flat backs. They're insects, the kind of parasite-looking insects. Notice we've got them opposite here. These are our barnacles. These are our isopods. Different types of isopods that are out there. Shrimp, crabs, lobsters all fall into the category. We've got a little bit of lobster anatomy here. If you are interested in that, feel free to pause and take a look, but I'm not gonna walk through that. Another example of a marine arthropod is a horseshoe crab, a local example that you can see throughout Florida. These are among the oldest creatures on Earth, believed to have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years based on the fossil record that we have available. If you haven't seen one, it's these guys. Image is a little blurry here. It looks better on mine. And there you have it. Let me know if you have any questions. Message me if you have anything that you're not sure about, or need anything else. 7.2 marine invertebrates. Next time around, we will move on to marine fishes, and then for 7.4, we'll cover birds, mammals, and reptiles all in one lesson. Have a good week.